quindi ho un frammento che presumibilmente proviene dal New Mexico dal 1947. E ho fatto delle analisi del materiale su di esso e spero di pubblicare un articolo su di esso entro la fine di quest'anno o l'anno prossimo. Poi stamperò quell'articolo e voglio ficcarlo nel culo o nella gola di ogni singolo scettico e debunker perché abbiamo scoperto che quel materiale è anomalo e abbiamo scoperto che il rapporto Erlo su questo materiale era una bugia. Era una bufala. Wow, non hanno elencato la metà degli elementi in esso contenuti. Non hanno elencato nessuna delle configurazioni isotopiche interessanti. Niente. Gary Nolan lo sa. Poche persone lo sanno che hanno pezzi del campione madre. C'era un campione grande. Ne ho solo un frammento.
I think in the past, if you wanted to destroy your academic career, then you would just say that you study UFOs. But it looks like that could finally be changing. The University at Albany, it's a big public research university in New York, has just accepted a major endowment to study UAP in their physics department and to launch a dedicated program called U Albany Project X, also known as UAPX. And it's built on the same team you saw in A Tear in the Sky, out on rooftops in Laguna Beach with cameras and sensors, except now they've gone academic. So today I'm going to break down what U Albany Project X actually is, who's behind it, including some very interesting names, and why I think this really does shift the game for UAP in academia. So a quick recap of the news. On November 5th, 2025, the University at Albany, that's SUNY Albany, put out a press release announcing what they called a transformational endowment gift. The donor is Tony Gorman. He's a longtime businessman, former principal owner of the Gorman Group. That's a big highway construction and materials company. The key point is he didn't donate to a random mysteries center. He specifically funded UAP research inside the physics department. So that money is being used to create an endowed fund for long-term UAP research in physics. And it also launches a dedicated program called U Albany Project X. So it's now an academic collaboration focused entirely on rigorous UAP science. The core physics team at U Albany looks like this, with one key addition I'll mention in a second. But first, you have Professor Kevin Knuth. He's on the right there. He's known in the UAP world. If you watched my videos, I've covered him many times in the past. Really, he's known for his work estimating performance characteristics from military encounters, and he's lead author on a big review paper called The New Science of Unidentified Aerospace Undersea Phenomena. You have Associate Professor Matthew Shadagis. I have an interview coming up this week. Really interesting. You should watch it. He's the lead author on their field methods paper. So that's the one that details how they actually do UAP expeditions on the ground. There's also Associate Professor Cecilia Levy. She's part of the core UAP research base at U Albany. And in the photo there, you have Norman. He's actually who donated all the money. So thanks so much for getting this project off the ground. University of Albany also notes that Dr. Eric W. Davis is coming on as a visiting adjunct faculty member for this UAP research base. So yes, that is that Eric Davis. He's known for advanced propulsion work, involvement with NIDS and BASS, and of course, the infamous Wilson Davis notes. And he's volunteering his time and energy to join this project. I can't believe it hasn't gotten more news. And on the UAPX side, UAPX, if you remember, was formed by Kevin Day and Gary Voorhees. They're both Navy veterans from the Nimitz encounter. They created UAPX as a nonprofit to collect hard, instrumented data on UAP. Gary has already said publicly that U Albany Project X is the direct academic continuation of what UAPX built from scratch, and that the nonprofit will wind down over the next few months as the mission fully moves into the university. So we've got Navy veterans, career physicists, and a controversial propulsion researcher under one academic roof now. And they have an endowment behind them. They have funding, at least for the salaries. So let's talk about the actual science. If you saw A Tear in the Sky, you already got a visual taste of their basic approach. So in 2021, UAPX and the U Albany team ran a field expedition in Laguna Beach, California, for 5 days and 5 nights. They set up a multi-sensor array overlooking the ocean, key area where the Tic Tac was seen. We've had so many UFO encounters. So they had infrared and visible light cameras on tripods. They had access to Doppler weather radar data. They had radiation detectors. like cosmic watch counters, and they synchronize timing between instruments, although that's quite difficult to do, and they use special software to analyze video frame by frame. They then wrote up their methods and results in a peer-reviewed journal, Progress in Aerospace Sciences. I don't think a lot of people realize that they have published, both of them, Shadagus and Kevin Knuth. So most of the candidate weird events that they captured could actually be explained as planes, satellites, artifacts, environmental effects, standard mundane items. But there was one event that resisted easy explanation. That was a cluster of bright white dots in a dark spot that was seen across multiple videos, and they still classify that as ambiguous. So it's not aliens confirmed by any means. It's not case closed, but it is, we don't have a mundane explanation yet. The important thing is not that they had one weird event. It's that they're treating UAP like an actual particle physics problem, and they're bringing it into mainstream science. That's the most important part of this whole project. There's just so much stigma in this topic. At Seoul conference, I talked to a Belgian academic, and at his major university, a tenured professor was kicked out for just looking into UAPs in his spare time. So there's still a huge stigma in this topic. So what they're doing now is they're defining instruments and thresholds. They're using multiple sensors, multiple baselines. They're using scientific statistical language, right? 3 sigma for ambiguity, 5 sigma for real anomalies. And they're really pushing the methods out, open source, writing in peer-reviewed papers, so other people can replicate and critique their methods and results. They followed up a tear in the sky with their big review paper in The New Science of Unidentified Aerospace Undersea Phenomena, which basically says, look, we're past the point where UAP can be dismissed out of hand. The only way forward is long-term, multi-instrument, statistically rigorous programs. So that's exactly the kind of work you expect from universities. So that's what Tony Gorman's endowment is funding. It's not stories, it's not hype, it's not new documentaries, but it's, peer-reviewed science from a major university. I think that's game-changing. So is this going to, release disclosure overnight? I doubt it. Honestly, the stigma around UAPs in academia is still very real. I already told my story about in Belgium. There's also issues in the Netherlands. So Europe has serious issues, even though there are some programs at universities across Europe. There was a survey a couple of years ago that asked faculty at major US universities what they thought of UAP research. Most of them said, yeah, it's important. We should study it. But they also admitted there's a strong stigma and real career risk if you put UFOs in your job talk. So up until now, the one big safe academic home for UAP was the Galileo project at Harvard. Avi Loeb's effort to build sensor arrays and systematically search for anomalous objects. They just recently put a new camera system on top of the Sphere in Las Vegas. There are other researchers scattered around in Sweden, Germany, and a few other places, but big visible programs are rare. Now with U Albany Project X, UAPX, you've got another major university saying in public, we are endowing UAP research in our physics department. We're hiring people, including Eric Davis, and we are not ashamed to say the word UAP. I think that's huge. So that doesn't make the stigma just vanish overnight, but it does change the calculation for young scientists. Before, if you were a grad student and you were interested in UAP, you basically had to hide it or hope Galileo would take you. Now you can say, hey, look, Harvard has a project, U Albany has a project, there are peer-reviewed papers, there's endowments, this is a real field. And so for universities watching from the sidelines, this sets a precedent. So it's now possible to fund and run a UAP program without becoming a laughing stock. And you're actually getting funding, right? Think about that. Funding is huge in the academic world. And now more funding is going into real UAP programs at universities. I think that really is a game changer. So from my perspective as a former fighter pilot and someone basically obsessed with this topic, I think this is exactly the direction we need. We need multi-sensor instrumented data, of course. We need long-term repeatable studies, like real actual science looking at this. We need real statistics, real peer review, right? We do have peer-reviewed papers. I've heard people say where's all the science? Where's the peer-reviewed papers? There are peer-reviewed papers. Links are in the... And now we have stable funding at a real university, right? University of Albany. So will University of Albany Project X solve the UAP mystery next year? No. They're probably going to spend a lot of time refining their methods. They're going to start ruling out satellites, all types of mundane objects, and dealing with a lot of boring issues, right? Science is boring down at the core. It's difficult, like sensor calibration, false positives, tons of data analysis. It is difficult, right? But that's what grown-up science actually looks like. We now have at least 2 serious academic centers, plus a growing network of smaller efforts worldwide. And we have a pathway for citizen science groups. Like there's so many of them right now, all scattered, but groups like UAPX to graduate into academia. So to become professional mainstream instead of burning out on rooftops with no funding, right? Releasing documentaries that do get seen, make a splash, and then go away.